Okay, everyone, so this is part 2, chapter number 5 of modern history. We are on chapter number 5, social and cultural awakening. We are going to start with Debendranath Tagore and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. The Brahmo Samaj had in its meanwhile continued to exist but without much life till Debendranath Tagore, father of Rabindranath Tagore, revitalized it. Debendranath was a product of the best in the traditional Indian learning and the new thought of the West. In 1839, he founded the Tattva Bodhini Sabha to propagate the Ram Mohan Roy's ideas. In time, it came to include most of the prominent followers of Ram Mohan and Derozio and other independent thinkers like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Akshay Kumar Dutt. The Tattva Bodhini Sabha and its organ, the Tattva Bodhini Patrika, promoted a systemic study of India's past in the Bengali language. It also helped spread a rational outlook among the intellectuals of Bengal. In 1843, Debendranath Tagore reorganized the Brahmo Samaj and put a new life into it. The Samaj actively supported the movement for widow remarriage, abolition of polygamy, women's education, and improvement of the rights condition and temperances. The next towering personality to appear on the Indian scene was Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the great scholar and reformer. Vidyasagar dedicated his entire life to the cause of social reform. Born in 1820, a very poor family, he struggled through hardship to educate himself and in the end rose in 1851 to the position of principalship of Sanskrit College. Though he was a great Sanskrit scholar, his mind was open to best in Western thought, and he came to represent a happy blend of Indian and Western culture. His greatness lay above all in his sterling character and shining intellect. Possessed of immense courage and fearless mind, he practiced what he believed. There was no lag between his beliefs and his action, between his thought and his practice. He was simple in dress and habits and direct in his manner. He was a great humanist who possessed immense sympathy for the poor, the unfortunate, and the oppressed. In Bengal, innumerable stories regarding his high character, moral qualities, and deep humanism are related till this date. He reassigned from government service for he would not tolerate undue official interference. His generosity to the poor was fabulous. He seldom possessed a warm coat, for he invariably gave it to the first naked beggar he met on the street. Vidyasagar's contribution to the making of modern India is many-sided. He evolved the methodology for teaching Sanskrit. He wrote a Bengali primer which is still used till this day. By his writings, he helped in the evolution of modern prose style in Bengali. He opened the gates of the Sanskrit college to non-Brahmin students, for he was opposed to the monopoly of Sanskrit studies that the priestly castes was enjoying at that time. He was determined to break the priestly monopoly of scriptural knowledge. To free Sanskrit studies from the harmful effects of self-imposed isolation, he introduced the study of Western thought in the Sanskrit college. He also helped found a Sanskrit college which is now named after him. Above all, Vidyasagar is remembered gratefully by his countrymen for his contribution to the uplift of India's downtrodden womanhood. Here, he proved a worthy successor to Ram Mohan Roy. He waged a long struggle in favor of widow remarriage. His humanism was aroused to the full by sufferings of the Hindu widows. To improve their lot, he gave his all and virtually ruined himself. In 1855, he raised up his powerful voice, backed by the weight of immense traditional learning, in favor of widow remarriage. Soon, a powerful movement in favor of widow remarriage was started, which continues till this date. Later, in the year 1855, Now a large number of petitions from Bengal, Madras, Bombay, Nagpur and other cities of India were presented to the government asking it to pass an act legalizing the remarriage of widows. This agitation was successful and such a law was enacted. The first lawful Hindu widow remarriage among the upper caste in our country was celebrated in Calcutta on 7 December 1856 under the inspiration and supervision of Vidyasagar. Widows of many other castes in different parts of the country already enjoy this right under the customary law. An observer has described the ceremony in the following words: I shall never forget the day when Pandit Vidyasagar came with his friend, the bridegroom, at the head of a large procession. The crowd of spectators was so great that there was not an inch of moving space, and many fell into the big drains which were be seen by the sides of Calcutta streets in those days. After the ceremony, it became the subject of discussion everywhere, in the bazaars and in the shops, in the streets, in the public squares, in the student lodging houses, in gentlemen's drawing rooms, in offices and in distant villages, homes, where even women earnestly discussed it among themselves. The weavers of the Santipur issued a peculiar kind of women's sari which contained woven along its borders the first line of a newly composed song which went to say, May Vidyasagar live long. For his advocacy of widow remarriage, Vidyasagar had to face a bitter enmity of orthodox Hindus. At the time, even his life was threatened, but he fearlessly pursued his chosen course. Through his efforts, which included the grant of monetary help to needy couples, 25 widow remarriages were performed between 1855 and 1860s. In 1850s, Vidyasagar protested against child remarriage. All his life he campaigned against polygamy, and he was also deeply interested in the education of women. As government inspector of schools, he organized 35 girls' schools, many of which ran at his own expense. As secretary to the Bethune School, he was one of the pioneers of higher education for women. The Bethune School, founded in Calcutta in 1849, was first fruit of the powerful movement for women's education that arose in 1840s and 50s. While the education of women was not unknown in India, a great deal of prejudice against it existed. Some even believed that the educated women would lose their husbands. The first steps in giving modern education to girls was taken out by missionaries in 1821, but these efforts were marred by emphasis on Christian religious education. The Bethune School has great difficulty in securing students. The young students were shouted at and abused, and sometimes even their parents were subjected to social boycott. Many believed that girls who had received Western education would make slaves of their husbands. Pioneers of reform in Western India. The impact of Western ideas was felt much earlier in Bengal than in Western India, which was brought under effective British control as late as 1818. Bal Shastri Jambikar. Bal Shastri Jambikar was one of the first reformers in Bombay. He attacked Brahminical orthodoxy and tried to reform popular Hinduism. In 1832, he started to a weekly, the Darpan, in which objective of chasing away the mists of anger, ignorance which clouded men's minds and shedding over them the light of knowledge in which the people of Europe had advanced so far before the other nations of the world. In 1849, the Paramhansa Mandali was founded in Maharashtra. Its founders believed in one God and were primarily interested in breaking caste rules. As its meeting, members took food cooked by low caste people. They also believed in permitting widow remarriage and the education of women. Branches of the Mandali were formed in Pune, Satara, and other towns of Maharashtra. Satara. Referring to the Mandali's influence on young people, R.G. Bhandarkar, the famous historian, later recalled, when we went for long walks in the evening, we talked about evils of the caste distinctions. how much damage was done by this division between high and low, and how true progress in this for this country could never be achieved without removing these distinctions. In 1848, several educated young men from the Students' Literary and Scientific Society, which had two branches, the Gujarati and the Marathi Dhyanan Prasarak Mandalis. The society organized lectures on popular science and social questions. One of the aims of the society was to start schools for education of women. In 1851, Jyotiba Phule and his wife started a girls' school at Pune, and soon many other schools came up. Among the active promoters of these schools were Jagannath Shankar, Seth and Bhau Daji. Phule was also a pioneer of widow remarriage movement in Maharashtra. Vishnu Shastri Pandit founded the Widow Remarriage Association in 1850s. Another prominent worker in this field was Karsondas Mulji, who started the Satya Prakash in Gujarati in 1852 to advocate widow remarriage. An outstanding champion of new learning and social reform in Maharashtra was Gopal Hari Deshmukh, who became famous by the pen name Lokhitawadi. He advocated the reorganization of Indian society on rational principles and model humanistic and secular values. Jyotiba Phule, born in a low caste Mali family, was also acutely aware of the social degraded position of non-Brahmins and untouchables in Maharashtra. All his life he carried on campaign against upper caste domination and Brahminical supremacy. Dadabhai Naroji was another leading social reformer of Bombay. He was one of the founders of an association to reform the Zoroastrian religion and the Parsi Law Association, which agitated for the grant of legal status to women and for uniform laws of inheritance and marriage for the Parsis. From the very beginning, it was in the main through the Indian language, press and literature that the reformers carried their struggle. To enable Indian languages to play this role successfully, they undertook such humdrum tasks as preparation of language primers, etc. For example, both Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Rabindranath Tagore wrote Bengali primers, which were being used till this date. In fact, the spread of modern and reformist ideas among the mass of people occurred primarily through Indian languages. We should also remember that the significance of the 19th century reformers lay not in their numbers but in the fact that they were the trendsetters. It was their thought and activity that were to have decisive impact on the making of a new India. Thank you everyone for listening. This was chapter number 5, Modern History by Bipin Chandra. Please subscribe and do like the channel, and stay tuned for more updates on next chapters. Hope you are doing very well. All the best for the mains examination, and listen to it very carefully. This has been a widely curated audiobook for history, and all the other subjects will be coming soon as well. Thank you everyone who were listening, and all the best.